to Renee.
Welcome to Better Than Air. I'm Renee, this is Dan, and we're here in search of inspired solutions.
Today we have an old friend of mine. Bridget and I go back 25 or 30 years, don't we, Bridget?
Absolutely, yeah.
Let me read your bio. Bridget Freeman was born in the north of England. She graduated from the University of Newcastle upon Tyne Medical School in 1984. After completing house jobs in internal medicine, general surgery, and medical management of pediatric surgical patients, she completed residency and fellowship in pediatrics and pediatric hematology-oncology with the University of Florida. She's board certified in pediatrics, pediatric hematology-oncology, and medical acupuncture. Her interests include engagement in health and wellness across the lifespan, stress reduction and quality of life, the effects of stress and chronic illness, the health of the healthcare provider, assessing the healthcare system, and health literacy and setting up for children up for success. She has held 18 state licenses, worked in rural critical access hospitals and urban large pediatric hospitals. So thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
Delightful to be here with you both.
Yes.
So tell me, Bridget, it's been a long time. You and I worked on some projects in holistic healthcare many years ago. We had a project where we worked with students at UNF and taught them in general concepts about complementary care. And we also had a rotation for medical residents that came through, and we showed them different aspects of that. Tell me what you've been doing in the meantime and where your passions have led you.
So yes, it's nice to come full circle with you, to look at just talking to students about this versus trying to actually implement it either at the bedside or in the clinic with patients. So I think that one of the challenges we have in traditional medicine is keeping people well. And that in itself requires a different conversation than is permissible currently in our current healthcare system. So yes, we have primary care in pediatrics where we do look at nutrition, health and wellness and development in children. And that is slightly different to looking at a model of parental engagement, healthy food choices, relearning how to cook, lifestyle management, sleep, and healthy exercise. That by itself is a visit by itself. And to my knowledge, and I could be just not aware of that, this is not funded currently by insurance companies. So this is a very difficult financially process to engage in a traditional practice.
You remember you and I attended a conference, I think it was the American Holistic Medical Association conference, and there was a physician there that was working with cancer patients, and he told us about what his intake was like, and he went to the patient's home and he went through all of their cabinets, and he basically made notes on their whole life from just looking at their house. And I don't know that anybody's really going to do that, are they?
I don't think so. I think home visits are sort of passé, unfortunately.
Yeah.
We definitely learn a lot by visiting people's homes, just by walking through the door.
Yeah.
So I think that's sort of a good entree into, we have to meet patients where they are. And one of the challenges is time, is that most people, their day-to-day living is so packed with events that seem necessary that it's very difficult for them to have space for something new. So how have I engaged in this? So I finished practicing pediatric hematology-oncology exclusively in about 1999 and started in northern Michigan in an outpatient clinic practicing integrative medicine. And I was supposed to do that full time, and unfortunately the pediatrician who was going to arrive did not. So I actually ended up moving back into general pediatrics, which hadn't been what I had planned to do necessarily. And then after that, had an opportunity to move to Canada for 6 years to really refine my practice of traditional pediatric medicine. So I was then able to go back into the delivery room with babies, their parents, for premature babies and their parents, and look at what was the traditional recovery from that. And so developed a very strong interest in how do we access healthcare systems at a point where it is going to be very useful to that individual and appropriate. But going back to what we're wanting to talk today about, which is really health and wellness, what I had started to do when I was still in Jacksonville is learn acupuncture. And for whatever reason, that really didn't finish its training until about 2018. And so I became very interested in stress and its relationship to illness. And so my first foray into looking at the effect of stress on nutritional choices was looking at children who came into the oncology clinic and were eating quite a reasonable diet when they came in. And after we had given them chemotherapy, their food choices changed to things that were more sugary, more M&Ms, more packets of French fries or potato chips. And so that was sort of an interesting observation that stress changes how we look at food choices. And I think all of us have had those nights where we have been up all night and the next day, instead of having our healthy breakfast, we really just want a muffin and a cup of coffee. So again, we know that being up all night changes our insulin levels, our cellular responsiveness to insulin, and elevates our blood sugars. And from a cognitive level, missing 24 hours sleep is equivalent cognitively to being drunk. That's the level of attention and intention you can have. So that was the first observation about stress. And then for that population of children, I also noticed that 3 mothers, after the death of a child, had developed breast cancer within 3 years of the death of their children. And so that could have been just a random event. I think we now know that chronic sleep loss, particularly in women, is associated with breast cancer. We know that many of the sleep deprivation formats result in a loss of a circadian rhythm of cortisol. But if we take people who are sleeping normally for and have done all their life, and we sleep deprive them by 2 hours for 6 days, what we know at the end of that, they start to express oncogenes that they didn't express before that promote cancer. So again, here we have this category of chronic stress. So whether this is just sleep deprivation, whether this is emotional, whether it's physical stress, having an effect on health and wellness.
So what does somebody like a firefighter or somebody in the police service, and they have a 24-hour job and they're on shifts, what happens in their world after this chronic type stress? What's that like for them?
So I would think that, so what we do know is that by depriving someone of sleep, your ability to focus, pay attention, and make critical decisions is significantly impaired. What we do know that if you take 5 grams of micronized creatine as a healthcare provider after being up all night, it improves your decision making. So there are things like that you can do. I think the solutions that I have found really helpful are breathing exercises. So let's say I've been up in the middle of the night attending a delivery, I go back to bed at 6 in the morning, I'm back at work at 10. So before I actually get out of bed, I'm going to do a 15 to 20 minute breathing exercise. I recently have used Richard Davidson's app Healthy Minds, which I find absolutely fantastic, to help me navigate attention, focus, communication, values, and purpose.
So what do you feel after you've done the breathing? If you didn't do the breathing, what would you feel? And after you've done the breathing, what do you feel? Notice in your being.
So prior to using creatine and just using the breathing, what I would say is frontal cortex activity is back online. So I'm able to think more clearly. I'm able to regulate mood better. I'm not as grumpy. So we do know that when you lose REM sleep, you are not able to emotionally regulate as you would have done if you had had a night of REM sleep. So for instance, during daylight savings time, we know that if you, lose an hour, judges the next day are more likely to actually provide a more severe sentence than they would have done if they had had enough sleep. We know that there are 25% more heart attacks the day that we have lost an hour sleep. When we gain an hour, there's 25% less heart attacks, and sentencing is less severe.
So you and I used to talk about the training of physicians. And one of the things that you see with physicians is they're almost superhuman. In other words, the resident physician has to stay up for a couple days sometime. I know that the laws have changed over the last number of years,
Yeah.
but we would never ask our airline pilot or our truck driver to make critical life decisions and have a lack of sleep. Tell me about your profession and when I, as a patient, sit across from a physician, what he or she has been through and with the lack of sleep and the training, what does that feel like to go through as a physician?
So I think that you're right, things have changed dramatically. So when I started medicine in the UK as doing internal medicine, we had 3-day weekends. That means we would start work at 9 a.m. on a Friday morning, we would finish work at 5 p.m. on a Monday evening. And you might get 3 hours sleep during that period of time. So clearly that would be unsafe for someone to try and drive a motorized vehicle on Monday evening. And because there were some adverse outcomes for physicians, that was changed. So that's the initial residency. The second residency, we would be on call every third night. You can expect to not have very much sleep for that night, practice medicine all the next day, and then go home. So again, I'm not sure that we were that safe to drive a motorized vehicle at that point. So all of us are pretty young at that time, and most of us were thinking about having families. So in my year, 3 of us had a child, sort of back to back. We saved up 2 years vacation to have time off to have a baby, which gave us 3 weeks off. And we had to do all the call that we would have missed in those 2 weeks ahead of time. So that means while you were pregnant, you would need to have taken extra call. So I had one during residency, one during fellowship. So that means you come to motherhood exhausted. It is definitely not the best place. So what do I see now in the general population? I still see women coming to motherhood exhausted. And again, not because of the work schedule that I have, but because of obligations that they do have at home, their work schedule, the desire to have a vaginal delivery. Obviously, most women do not want operative deliveries. However, sometimes the baby's not in the right position. Sometimes the baby just doesn't tolerate labor, has a cord around its neck, or whatever, or the baby is just in a funny position and there's a lot of pressure on the baby's head. And so you have that woman who's had 30 hours in labor and now has a cesarean section. That woman is not in a position to breastfeed. She is exhausted. And I've actually seen babies have respiratory arrests at the breast because the mother has fallen asleep breastfeeding the baby in that situation. So this concept of readiness to breastfeed is not just an emotional readiness or a desire to breastfeed. It's a physical and physiologic. So all of us would be exhausted after running a marathon for 30 hours, not eating particularly well during that period of time. So I think that going back to medicine, we've changed how residents are on call. And there is a concern about, should residencies be longer? Do we need to expose people more? Or do we narrow the field in which physicians study? So for instance, we used to have pediatricians who would see their patients in the hospital and come back to the clinic and do clinic, be on call for those patients at night, leave clinic if there was an emergency, and all the people in it to go to the hospital. So there's a lot of running around. And ideally your office would be in the same area as the hospital, so you didn't actually have to drive. So now more and more we're seeing that's not really feasible as our understanding of physiology becomes much more detailed and hospital medicine becomes much more intense. It's not really possible to do those two things, but it still does happen. So recently I went to Beloit, Wisconsin, where again the same model is there. You cover the inpatients and you cover the clinic at the same time, and you take call for 2 or 3 days in a row. Generally, to have a vibrant obstetrical practice, you need a population of about 20,000 people. And so that 20,000 people isn't actually just the volume of patients that you're going to get, it's the buying power of that patient population. So if you don't have enough buying power for a target, it's very hard to recruit people to come live in your community. So if the only shop you have is Walmart, it's very hard for someone to say, yes, I'm going to leave a metropolitan area and come live in the countryside with only a Walmart.
Yeah.
There may be a food desert too, right? So I've been places where there is no organic food. There is very little fresh food. I have to shop before I drive to that place. So I go to some places in Montana and have been to places in Iowa where I go to the biggest town where I land, go grocery shopping, bring all my food with me. And so I know I've got to get there a good time in advance because I don't want to drive in the snow at night. So lots of different ways of...
So even in Iowa, where we think is normally a farming state, that there are food deserts that you find there? And
there's food deserts because of poverty. People can't afford organic food. And you know, organic food perishes much faster, so it can't stay on the shelves as long. So of course that's a big problem, not just for me, because I don't live there and I can actually go and buy the groceries before I get there, but for the people who actually live there. So again, going back to physicians, so yes, lifestyle has changed because now most primary care physicians are not taking night call, or they may take phone calls for their patient population, but they're not getting up to go to the hospital with them. So then the question is, okay, so let's say your practice is in a community that is 100 miles away from a major hospital. And so this is a community hospital. What happens when your child gets bronchiolitis? Who is going to take care of that child in the hospital? So there's two options. One is that you have some trained pediatric nurses. I pretty much can tell you there's no trained pediatric emergency room physicians in that hospital. And you most likely are going to have nurses who are trained as med-surg adult nurses taking care of your baby in that facility. You may have a respiratory therapist who is trained in pediatrics, you may not. So it's becoming more and more problematic of where do we send these children? So do we transfer everything, or do we try to take care of very common things by adult nursing? And so that makes it more complicated for the pediatrician who is on call, because now you're trying to make sure that everything is almost equivalent to having a full trained pediatric nurse there. So this is the access issue for rural medicine in the United States. Fortunately, there's generally fewer pediatric admissions than adult admissions for common things. If you have a child with a chronic illness, you are most likely going to have to drive to a tertiary care facility or relocate to somewhere that's nearer that in order to have appropriate care. Sometimes that's just not possible, and patients just muddle through the best they can. Some places have funding for fuel. Many parents don't have enough money to actually buy the fuel to try to visit their child in the hospital. So even in Atlanta, I've had times where we have seen the parent when they were admitted, and we don't see the parent until discharge because they've got lots of kids at home and there is nobody to babysit, or mom's got to go to work and dad's got to go to work, and they can't afford the fuel to come back. And so that is a tragedy for the child, and of course increased workload on the nursing staff. Well, everybody, we have to recruit from all sorts of departments to have a surrogate parent.
So circling back to another subject, you've worked in the UK healthcare system, and you worked in the Canadian healthcare system, and you've worked in our system. When we talked about the value in the American system, we're spending so much more money in getting outcomes that are less than many of the other industrialized countries. What do you think, having experienced all three healthcare systems as a provider, what do you think can be done in our system to improve it and make it a bit better?
So you're really bringing up universal healthcare coverage of what is the difference between a single payer system and a multiple payer system. So the advantage of a single payer system is you don't have all that middle portion of insurance in the way. So that just doesn't exist. So I do the billing if I was in Canada. I receive my healthcare in France. My GP does the billing in front of me with either a carte vitale or I pay cash. And so there is no, that's it, that's done, one and done. I get a piece of paper if I want to send that somewhere. But there is not this massive infrastructure of prior authorization, of sending the bill in, getting it reimbursed. Of course, the price difference is also represented by that cost saving.
And to your point, if there's 5 people in a doctor's office and their job is to argue with 5 people in an insurance company, then we're paying for 10 people for an overhead that we're really not using, just people to have discussions with each other. And it's not the physician or the nurse or the therapist that's doing the job. It's just these 5 people over here and 5 people over there, and they're pushing back at each other.
Correct.
Paperwork as opposed to healthcare.
Right, so you have an additional cost there, which is of course directly added to the health insurance and then over inflates the cost. So let's say I have my routine blood work done in France. It costs me 44 euros for the exact same blood work that I would have got here in the United States, where it cost me $1,500 through Quest.
Now, let me see if I get this. Now, you live in the United States. You're a full-time resident of the U.S.
Actually, I'm not a full-time resident.
And you have your primary care physician as where?
In France.
In France. Well.
All right, so there's a story behind this. So I'm married to a French national. Our base actually is not in the United States. I work here in the United States. And so I had my GP was my obstetrician, one of my obstetrician friends from residency. And she went into private practice some years ago and retired. And I absolutely loved her. She was an amazing clinician, spent an hour with each patient, and really practiced what I call fantastic healthcare. So she was so detailed and so good at following up on all of the laboratory studies, the results, the imaging. If she needed to spend 2 hours with you, she would have spent 2 hours with you. So she retired, and I thought, how am I ever going to find this again in the United States? Maybe it's time for me to move my healthcare to France. And so I said that to my husband, what do you think? And so I established in the same area where we live in Bordeaux, and with the rest of my extended family over there, and have a lovely woman who is in her probably mid-30s, very similar to the GP that I just left behind. And that's where I go twice a year. So in June I will go back and see my GP, and gives me a good excuse to go to Bordeaux.
And now tell me what that's like, because are you walking into facilities similar to here, or is it in an older building? What is the feeling when you walk into that appointment? Is it different than one here?
Yes, it's very different. So there's a whole mixture to that. So there's one size fits all. So she lives in a multi-practice building, and so on her floor there is 3 family doctors, a psychiatrist, a psychologist. Upstairs there is physical therapy, there's the dietitian. So you come in downstairs, there's 3 floors, the pharmacy is downstairs, there's an elevator or the steps, either one. Very modern building, everything looks very Swedish when you go in there, very light, clean, minimalistic furniture, but comfortable. A little area for children to play. There's one receptionist, that's who I would talk to if I want to book an appointment, or I can go online to an app called Dr. Lieb. And so I look at her name on Dr. Lieb, find out when she's free, and I book my appointment to go see her.
There's only one receptionist, there's only one staff?
There's only one staff.
Wow, only one staff.
So the waiting room is silent. There is no television on.
Mm-hmm.
It's completely quiet. People whisper. And the doctors will come out looking extremely casual, tennis shoes, jeans, give you a first name, you go in and see them, you spend 30 minutes with them. She has a beautiful office which looks out onto like a little forest, and she's got windows on 2 sides, so very light, very airy. She has an exam table with a little stool to climb up. She has her computer. She has a little Apple swipe pay for either your credit card or for the card Vital. I usually arrive before my appointment time, and for many of my appointments I have left before the time that I was scheduled.
Hmm. And so this is a cash payment then?
It's a cash, it's 44 euros.
Okay, and so if you were a person that was a full-time resident of France, would it be that way, or?
No, it would be paid for.
So the single payer
Yes.
would pay for that, but it still would cost you 44
euros.
And so what is that? That's about $50 today,
Yes.
or something like that?
Correct.
And that's for an hour appointment. What about
30 minutes. 30 minutes.
20 minutes?
30 minutes.
30 minutes. And what about things like blood tests or things like that?
So the blood tests are done separately. So I make an appointment or just go to the blood. I know when it's open.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's fasting, so you go there. A little bit more of a wait, but less than 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
You get your blood drawn. She shows you the app to download, and she said it'll be ready by about 4 o'clock this afternoon. It's right there. You can pull it up.
Well, and my hope is that Casey and Callie bring this type of system back to America.
Right.
I know there's a plan. It's trying to get back on course
Track
with giving us solutions
Mm-hmm.
for this burnout, and how do we stay engaged in our personal lives and our workforce while being happy and finding a purpose?
So that requires time, and you have to sense that something is wrong or something is missing or you want a change. And you have to decide what are the things that you have to do every day and what are the things that are not really that necessary. And you may just start by having one day a week where you don't get in your car. That could be Sunday. And we talked about that when we had students at UNF. And that gives you the opportunity as a family to be together. And for you to have maybe Sunday morning where you have a little bit of time to yourself, or Sunday afternoon. It doesn't have to be Sunday, it can be any day of the week. You have to have time to be present, to have silence, and to think. It's not possible to make those changes without introspection. And so how do you carve out that time? One of the things that I've noticed with families who are very, very busy and have little children is the amount of toys that are available. And of course, toys now are being replaced by iPads. But anyway, lots of stuff to distract children from communication with adults. So what I tell parents is, if you are in one of those houses that feels very chaotic, pack up all the toys, all of them, and take out 2 or 3 for that week, or just that day. But that way you are not committed to having a floor covered in toys constantly. that your child really can't pay attention to and can't actually use. So what I tell new parents when I am visiting with them, and I've used to have a very long discussion, particularly when I was in North Dakota, about food, and I realized that most parents just do not have the capacity at that moment in time to hear stories about what food they should be eating. So what we do know is that if you read to a child from birth versus waiting until they're age 3, they're more likely to graduate from high school, go to college, stay married to the same person. And for little girls, it gives them the same contraceptive advantage as an implantable contraceptive device. And parents look at me like, whoa. I said, well, there's no magic to that. It just means they listen to you. And that in situations where they have to make a decision, they've already made the decision before making it.
Wow.
Yes. So now that's really what I talk to parents about is reading. I talk to them about language, and if you speak another language, let's say you speak Russian or German or Spanish, and both of you speak that, that's the language you should continue, because language and culture are married. And if you leave one of them behind, you will not bring the other one forward. So if you want your child to speak back to you in your primary language, you can only use that language. And then when they go to school, they'll learn English. Children will learn a new language at the age of 3 completely in 6 months.
Wow.
It's impressive.
Yes.
So this is the first time and the only time in your life when you will learn exclusively by passive exposure. You will only hear and learn what you see, hear, and seen done. If you don't get anything, you will get nothing. If you have a language impaired child, it is critical that every member of the family learns the sign language of their choice, because there's multiple, but let's say American Sign Language, and you teach your child to speak through sign language. It's just, it really is an absolute must. So I've seen children get to the age 2 and cannot communicate with their parents because they're deaf, and their parents are hearing parents, and the parents have not learned sign language.
So at that point, they lose their ability to
It's
communicate.
much harder. Yes, it's much harder. You're going to have much more really bad behavior because of frustration and no internal language. There is no internal language being built. So it's not just there's lack of an expressive language, there is no language. It's silent.
It's heartbreaking.
It is silent.
This is an interesting observation you have about culture, because on trips to France, one of the interesting things is that they've worked so hard to keep their language from being encroached on, and therefore their culture. So in our country, when you see folks that are, say, Russian or French or from another culture, what do you see as far as them maintaining like the joys and the differences of those different cultures?
I think it's all related to someone's educational level when they arrive and what they already have been exposed to. So I think if you have someone who's coming as a physician from another country, they clearly recognize the values of maintaining their culture. And it may be across many levels of education, but for some people where life is very busy, they're in survival mode. So it's not really possible to focus on too much other than survival. So you have to be out of survival mode for these things to be able to be developed. Okay. So back to the bedside with these newborn babies and their parents. So what I talk to parents about is you expect your child to be healthy. It's an unspoken expectation. You want your child to be successful, and that's also often an unspoken expectation. These are not random events. They don't just randomly happen. They happen because you have knowledge, you have thought about this, you have developed goals and values, and you implement them. But there is a road for both of these. And I can tell you the one for the health and wellness. We have it mapped out on healthychildren.org, which is our national webpage for children in the United States. It's in English and Spanish. And unlike the car manual that sits in your driver's glove box, I don't want you to leave it there until your car is broken. I want you to go into healthychildren.org today and look at it. So the path to success is individualized, and so success, people tend to think in monetary values in this country, but it's a lot more than that. It's more about who is your child, what is their personality, have you spoken to them about kindness, generosity, sharing, appreciation. And in the past we've had religious organizations who have automatically done that for us. That's not necessarily the case anymore. So if they're not doing it, you have to do it. Otherwise your child will not grow up with that. What we do know is electronic devices are not helpful under the age of 5. And in Denmark, they've just been banned under the age of 13.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
Because it's so damaging to the child's brain.
And I'm sure there's some great research before they came to that drastic decision.
Yes.
That's huge. Yeah.
So I doubt that we will get rid of pink iPads in this country, but we never know.
So at what age do you think, a lot of our training in school now has to do with in front of a computer.
Mm-hmm.
So are you suggesting that what would you say the level of time in front of the screen should be limited to, or do you have an opinion on that?
So I think that there are times when the iPad is really helpful. So in the airport, long trips in the car, yes, it's a nice resource. If you are constantly watching video games that look more interesting than real life, we have a problem.
Mm.
And I have watched children with these video games, and the resolution, the color is fascinating. It's truly addictive. And I understand why children don't want to do anything else other than play video games.
Well, and that dopamine production that you get
Of course.
addicted to.
Of course.
So what you're saying is some parent on YouTube should do a review of the top most boring children's games, and that should become popular because they're more healthy for the kid.
So there's so much value to learning through that medium that I can't say you have to ban it. But you as a parent, it's important to know what the guidelines are. Does your 14-year-old have to go to bed with the iPhone or any phone next to them? The answer is no. Those can be turned off. Do we need to sit at a dinner table with our phones next to us? No, they can go in a breadbasket outside the room and we can go back and get it. So that brings up another thing, a simple thing that we know improves children's education is sitting at a dining room table and eating as a family. So children who go off to their rooms and eat alone, that to me is just heartbreaking. That should not be allowed. Or everybody sits at the dining room table, everybody has a meal together.
So can they interact and
is there
exchange
data
ideas?
for this?
There is. So in the early, I would say, I know where I was sitting when I read this article. I was sitting at the dining room table looking at this New England Journal article that had come out saying that children who sit at the dining room table are smarter than children who don't.
You know, there's a famous story
And this
about
was like 1990s.
Joseph Kennedy, I believe, and he used to have all of his children, all the Kennedy children, around the table, and they would discuss current events every day in the evening, and they kind of, in a nice way, competed over who could get the newspaper article and bring up something that somebody else hadn't noticed, or it was the highlight of their day. And to your point, the father and mother were at the table with them, so the father, no matter how busy business was, made time. You know.
So that brings up another good point, is the level of educational success is actually predicted by the father in the house and not the mother. And I was so disappointed when I heard that. So I think it's not necessarily you have to have a father. You could have two mothers. You could have two fathers. I don't think it's that. I think it's more that you have to have two people in the house
involved in your life.
That and redirecting. Could it be grandma and mom? Absolutely. But somebody has to take charge of childhood education and childhood learning. And particularly, we don't all have perfect kids who like to learn. You know, we have ones who want to go outside and run around in the woods all day long, and they've still got to be able to add up and learn the ABCs and read a book. So I think it's more the concept of having two individuals within a home, and that focusing on children is a priority. So that brings us back to how do we regain our attention and our focus and our value system. And that's where I feel that Richard Davidson has really gone above and beyond to help structure an approach to meditation for that. So Richard Davidson is a PhD psychologist out of UW-Madison, and met the Dalai Lama in the early 1990s. And I think he went on a trip, not specifically to meet the Dalai Lama, but while he was there he did, and explained what he did for mental health. And the Dalai Lama said, "You've described to me all about unhealthy minds. Tell me about people who meditate. Tell me, what do you see in the brains of those people? People who have compassion, what do their brains look like?" And we now know that the amygdala is enormous in people who meditate professionally, who are non-secular meditators, whose this is their life. So that capacity for compassion can be developed. So anyway, so Richard Davidson's been going backwards and forwards 4 times a year since the mid-90s to see the Dalai Lama every year, to report back research, to develop programs, and he has a non-profit, and this is one of the features of the non-profit, is Healthy Minds. I think it's important, if you're going to use Healthy Minds, that you listen to Richard Davidson on some of his podcasts. Wherever you want to look, just put in Richard Davidson. It could be on emotional health, it can be on Healthy Minds, it could be on memory. And he structured the podcast so that you are developing certain qualities in different segments. So the quality of attention, the quality of focus, the quality of communicating with peers or family members, looking at your value system, and then looking at how do you align your values with your purpose. So I've been doing it now for about probably over a year. I've still not finished it all. And so I probably do 10, 15 minutes of it a day. So I usually do it either morning, if there's not enough time in the morning, at bedtime. So what I found in this journey is that it becomes important as individuals, but particularly for healthcare professionals, anybody who is working with someone else, to develop a different skill set. And one of those skill sets is the skill set of being able to listen, the skill set of compassion and empathy, and capacity. So capacity I sort of see as this sort of expanding hole in the middle of you that is able to be with people in very difficult situations.
And the more you're in thrive mode as opposed to survive mode, the more capacity you have.
Correct.
Yeah. So tell us, where does our energy come from? I heard you give an explanation on this and it was wonderful.
So I think we look at energy in Western medicine as derived from nutrition that fuels our mitochondria, our methylation processes, and that those things can become depleted or damaged, and that if we can repair that, we can repair the energetic system. What I like about Eastern medicine is that they see energy as being housed in very distinct parts of the body. So if we look at the chakra system, those particular parts of the body are also responsible for not just an energy, but a quality of being grounded, of having self-confidence, of loving kindness, of being able to communicate clearly, connection to the divine. If we look at Eastern medicine, we have this concept that you inherit energy from your parents. You get this genetic energy from both of them, And if they're depleted, that's what you get. So when women have miscarriages after miscarriage, I always really encourage them to take a break, because you are depleted at this point. You need to replenish so that you have something to pass on to that baby. So that's what we call Jing. And we can access Jing through several ways. One is through the gate of life, which is the bottom of the spine, through doing Qigong, through doing acupuncture, through moxibustion, which is using a herb to warm an area of the body. But they also recognize that there's many different types of energy. So the shine that you see in someone's eyes is Shen, and that's controlled by the heart. This desire to push forward like a general is controlled by the liver. To be able to be kind and compassionate, you need a healthy stomach spleen to do that. So they see the value of the yin organ system in looking at emotional regulation as part of energy. So how do we sort of marry that in a traditional non-Asian culture? So I think what's happened in many of the Asian cultures, Ayurveda just becomes part of daily life. In Korea, Korean hand acupuncture, Korean acupuncture is also part of a daily life in terms of how you choose foods. You know, you have seasonal changes, so you're going to use different foods for that seasonal change. We don't have that in a Western culture. Mm-hmm. So you're going to have to be very intentional about bringing this concept of energy renewal. So of course sleep is a wonderful place for renewing our energy. And many people think that, okay, if I have a glass of wine just before bed, that sounds really nice, I'll be nice and relaxed, now I'll go to sleep. You will be sedated. You will take your frontal cortex offline. You will not sleep. So your non-REM sleep will be completely fragmented and chopped up. You will keep waking up, whether you're aware of it or not. You will keep waking up. So you will not have a good night's sleep with that glass of wine just before bedtime, or any time for that matter. All right, so what about marijuana? Marijuana completely disrupts our REM sleep. The REM sleep is when we actually clear our emotional cache, right? So we just sort of empty it, and so when your parents said, oh, just sleep on it, you'll feel better tomorrow, that is actually true, because that's what we do in REM sleep. So if we have a society that isn't sleeping well, right, feels like they are, not really aware that they're not really getting restorative sleep. We have a food supply that now is genetically modified. It's growing in soils that are depleted or worse, contaminated. We're eating a lot of pre-processed foods. Just our very basic biology, even as we understand it from Western medicine, cannot function normally. And then we have so much input into the eyes, into the nervous system, whether we're aware of it all day. Like at the end of the day, I don't know how many emails I have, but if I haven't looked at a day's worth of emails, forget it. I am not going to be able to find it. It's going to be so far down the line. And so that's become another job for us. So now we've got the job of raising a family, the job of actually earning money, the job of exercising because we don't have functional ways to exercise. And then we have this job of looking at our emails and making sure we're all up to date. And
connected.
And the expectation of the planet that you will do everything immediately, you'll drop everything right now to take care of that. So all of that is very exhausting. And even if it's only exhausting on an emotional level.
There's some research done to do with fire and light from the fire, and they say that it helps to wind us down when we look at a fire that is lower than our eyes.
Yes.
So it's an interesting thing because generally if we're winding down watching TV, it's usually here. But what happens, they say, is that the coloration of the light and the fact that our eyes are lowered, that it creates a certain series of of brain impulses that wind us down, because our ancestors did this around the fire before they went to sleep, and so therefore this is something that's hardwired into us.
Well, so interestingly, so there's definitely that thing of light that people now are putting like red light bulbs in their house, or have their iPhone rigged up to control the lighting system to be dimmed, so that we don't have a massive amount of light exposure. So
Especially blue lights.
Right.
Especially blue light.
And I tell parents, please do not have your child sleep with a nightlight. You can't produce melatonin with that nightlight on. So you can put it on a timer, but it needs to be off. Your child needs to sleep in the dark for melatonin to be produced. So going back to the sleep, so initially we were biphasic sleepers. We were not monophasic. So as hunter-gatherers, we would get up with sunrise and we would have a nap after lunch that would be about 2 hours, which would be regarded as excessive amount of time for a nap right now, because it would interfere with the length of the nighttime sleep. But the nighttime sleep was only about 6 hours. So it was changed, but in total, they still got the same benefit from it. So sleep initiation occurs for two reasons. One is the elevation of the adenosine, which makes you feel sleepy, and the drop in the cortisol level. So cortisol starts to come up in the morning, peaks around about lunchtime, and starts to go down in the afternoon, and is at its trough level probably around about 8 or 9 at night. So those two things happen simultaneously, different pathways, but they sort of align. Babies are polyphasic, and so we can first start to see the behavior of sleep around about 11 weeks gestation, and they develop REM sleep around about 29 weeks gestation, and then don't start to have non-REM sleep until they're getting much older. So you'll start to see a little bit at 3 to 4 weeks of age, but it's really increasing to adult levels by the end of the first year of life. So it's definitely a very different sleep pattern for little children. So light is important for going to sleep and waking up. Your body temperature has to drop 2 degrees to go to sleep. It has to come up 2 degrees to wake up. So lots of ways that you could do that. Interestingly enough, by putting a hot water bottle or a heating pad on your feet, it actually causes vasodilation and actually causes you to lose heat and fall asleep faster, which is sort of interesting.
Well, and I love my infrared sauna that warms me up before bed, and then poof.
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
So you go you go into the infrared sauna before bed, and
Everything except my head.
everything but your head.
Yes, you have
and I sweat,
Mm-hmm.
and I have the infrared that helps produce melatonin as well. And yes.
How long have you been doing that?
Maybe 6 months.
Wow.
Nice.
Yeah.
Do you have like a watch that you measure your depth of sleep?
I do. I have a Oura ring. Yes.
And are you able to measure that at all? Is there a pattern?
Oh, well, I didn't get my Oura ring until after I got my sauna, so
Yeah.
I can't tell you the difference.
And
I'm not willing to give up the sauna to go back for research purposes now.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
That's so
for
funny.
research purposes, you wouldn't.
So, Bridget, tell us your daily routine, and you should probably mention the sleep podcast that you did, so people can find
Sure.
that if they want to do further research.
Okay, certainly. So, so I'm a professional locum, so I travel for work. And so the practice has to be able to be done in a hotel room. So generally, so a few years ago I was diagnosed with osteoporosis, and so started Dr. Fishman's 12 yoga poses to restore bone health and reverse osteoporosis. So my daily routine has evolved. So now I do Wim Hof breathing before I get out of bed. I'll go to the bathroom, come back, lie down in bed again and do Wim Hof breathing. And that takes about 15 to 20 minutes. Then I will do either Healthy Minds, a little 5 or 6 minute segment. If I think I've got more time, I'll do Deepak Chopra's Presence. And that is an Ayurvedic app based on your dosha to help you with very much similar things to Healthy Minds, but not in quite as a structured manner. But that uses both auditory, breath work.
So maybe we should give a little context for people about doshas.
So dosha is just your body type, right? So we all have different body types. So if we look at it in traditional ways, like type A personalities, would be the way that we would look at it in traditional. But so in the Ayurvedic system, we have Pitta, Vata, and Kapha. In Chinese medicine, we have 5 elements, and people usually have some elements, 1 or 2, as part of their body type. So when you download Presence, you do a questionnaire which identifies your body type and then builds the app around that body type for you.
So, and this is something that is so different between traditional medicine from other countries, meaning Indian medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, Chinese medicine, and all the Asian countries, because they will see you as being a part of a category, even though whether you're tall or short or whatever, and they have a way of defining this, and this causes for their system of medicine to be able to determine whether you're out of balance or not.
Your susceptibilities, yes.
Yeah, in your susceptibility. So when they're able to determine when you're going out of balance, then this heads off a lot of major illnesses potentially.
Right, and it also will give, so irritability is part of the Pitta imbalance, and so it will give you very specific treatments, breathing exercises, mudras, meditations, specifically to address that Pitta personality. So again, depends on how much time I have. So those can be either 5 minutes to 20 minutes on there. Some of them can be a lot longer. And then I'll also do Richie Davidson's Healthy Minds. And so if I'm off, I will do yoga in the morning, and if I'm not, it will be when I come back in the evening. And that's my morning routine. I usually carry a red light with me. So red light therapy is just routine. It's so 15 minutes in front of red light. So if I'm starting at 7, I'm up at 5.
So what do you feel from the red light, pre-red light and post-red light? What do you feel or notice?
I think those feelings are relatively subtle and cumulative. So I think you feel just generally your body's more energized. So for instance, I just started swimming outside again, and I hadn't swum for a few months, and I am just not tired swimming. My muscles aren't tired. So it's not like I have to learn this all over again after 6 months off, which was quite surprising to me.
That's interesting, yeah.
Yes. So it's hard for me to know is that supplements that I'm using, like the creatine, so obviously creatine most of its data is around development of muscle and endurance. I'm specifically using it for brain function.
Yeah, it's interesting because I had a physician a few months ago that was a patient of mine, and he'd had surgery, and I was helping him get over his surgery quicker. And he said, "Oh yes, I've read some articles where creatine," and so I have seen you and some other physicians that are using creatine, not like a bodybuilder uses creatine, but for health benefits. Now,
Correct.
Our listeners and viewers should know that any advice that you give, you're a physician, but any advice that we give on the podcast is not medical advice. This is
Correct.
for entertainment purposes only.
Correct.
And so they need to talk to their own physician because everything is different in everybody's body.
Correct.
So in your case, what do you feel when you take the creatine? If there's a time when you forget it, or go off of it because you forgot to pack it, is there anything that you notice?
My mind is much sharper. It's
Sharper mind.
Sharper, faster, clearer.
And you've always been you've always been one of the quick-witted people that I've known in my life. You've always had a sharp mind ever since I've known you. You could make everybody stand around, as they say, with their quick wit.
So I think that menopause definitely slows us all down as women, and it's such a massive game changer. Not particularly with people just think of hot flashes. the hot flashes go for the majority of us, and that's just sort of a marker for where you are in your estrogen levels. But I would say bone health, joint health, memory, endurance, everything is so different. And so I would really like to see a lot more work developed on caring for postmenopausal women. I think that we've got a lot to learn about how to support women who are unable to take hormones. So definitely hormones replacement would be the smart way to go. But if you have a family history of cancer, particularly breast cancer or hormonally sensitive cancers, it's not something that you're able to do. And so for the majority of those women, weight gain is going to be significant because that becomes your source of estrogen. But anyway, so we got sort of off topic a little bit there in terms of daily practice. What I think is helpful for me with the daily practice is, again, capacity to tolerate and actually be with people who are suffering. And we usually see that suffering but in many ways. The ones that is easiest to be most empathetic with is when people are quiet and grieving. But people grieve in different ways. People will shout and become angry with anxiety. And so those are the more difficult people to learn how to deal with. And it's always at the end of your shift that this happens, when you're the most tired. Or the night that you've been...
hunger set in.
Exactly. Or
Yes.
you've been up all night and, now you've got, this is your first patient of the day. So, yes, I think that as having a daily practice is very important. I'm going to give one plug for what do I think we should be teaching medical students. So I think medical students, first of all, have to understand that stress is going to be part of their life. That mitigating stress, first of all, recognizing it is important. That they will tolerate stress better in their 20s and 30s than they will in their 40s, 50s, 60s and 70s. Ideally, you would have developed a stress mitigating practice prior to that. Hopefully. And there are some times when you need people to do things to you, that you cannot start this process by yourself. So if you're absolutely exhausted, if you have PTSD, if you have suffered any adverse experience either as a child or as a young adult, you are going to need help. And so I think teaching auricular acupuncture in medical school as a standalone treatment that medical students can give to each other.
Can you define auricular acupuncture?
So auricular acupuncture is treating the auricular points on the ear. The ear has an entire body map, and we're able to access the autonomic nervous system very easily through the ear. So the vagus, the sympathetic system, point 0, which resets everything. We can use the most famous protocol, which is the NADA protocol, which was developed in the 70s to support rehabilitation of people with addictions. And then now we have many, many more treatments. Battlefield acupuncture was developed by one of the physicians in the Air Force to deal with frontline trauma. And of course the ear is readily accessible. You don't have to undress anybody to put a few needles in their ears. The needles are easy to carry around in a pocket. If people who are frightened of needles, we have point stimulators that we can use. We can use Moxa. And then my best friend now is Korean hand acupuncture. So Korean hand acupuncture, again, has a body map on the hand, front and back, and you can just about access the entire acupuncture system on the hand without needles. So lovely for children, lovely in the workforce where you probably don't need to get any special credentialing to actually massage different points on the hand and then put on a little silver or gold disc to treat it.
Now, what's the difference between the silver or gold disc? Is there a difference?
So the silver really is for dispersion, for stagnation, and the gold is for really tonification.
Mm-hmm. So tell me what your goals are for yourself when you get up in the morning. What do you feel that you want to feel like? You're doing your routine. But what would you say is the ideal feeling, and how often are you able to get that feeling in yourself?
So rarely do I have that feeling when I'm working, right?
Mm.
So my husband and I went to stay at a little place called El Momo on the island of Saba. It's a Dutch island, just a 45 minutes ride from Marigot in St. Martin. And it's a volcanic island. It comes straight up out of the ocean. There's no way you can ride a bicycle on this island. It's too hilly. It's either too steep up or it's too steep down. Anyway, we had walked with our luggage a significant distance and then up the 100 steps to get to our little cottage in El Momo. Cottages were all white. There's no glass in them, just no glass in the windows, just these little shutters that come over. Massive philodendrons either side. And all the sheets inside are white with these little pink orchids put on the beds. It's just absolutely beautiful. So you go in and you open it and you look out to the Caribbean Sea, and there's this biblical grass in front that's just sort of moving with the wind. Oh my gosh, it was incredible. So I looked out and my mind just stopped for an hour.
Mm.
And I looked to my husband to think, well, did the same thing happen to you? But apparently it didn't, because he was pottering away in the kitchen, talking away and just constantly doing stuff. That's the only time I've ever had that happen. But I get close to it, always in nature. And usually I can't predict how I get there.
Mm. But you know it when you're there.
Oh, definitely know when I'm there, yes.
Yeah. There's a railway line not too far from here, and they made it into a park, and the trees go over the top. And I got to the place where I can feel the energy of the trees kind of
soothing.
Yeah, and the Japanese call it they call it forest bathing.
Forest breathing, yes.
Forest bathing.
Yes.
But I guess I understood what they were feeling. Now, sometimes somebody goes past on a road bike doing 30 miles an hour, and you lose that feeling for a moment. But when I come out of it, I can feel it, and it's different when I'm in the forest with a lot of trees than when I'm just walking in neighborhoods. Although I can feel something in the neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So because you felt it, you know how to sort of get there a little bit. But it requires quietness, no agenda for the day, and just being. So, I mean, there are definitely ingredients that you have that can help you get back to it.
Like a meditative state.
Yeah.
A prayer state where
Exactly.
you're quiet enough to listen to
stop.
God.
Yes.
To actually,
Your brain just stops.
Yes.
And it's not like, so you have truly become the witness. You are no longer yourself.
Yeah.
You are sort of behind.
You are the observer.
You're the observer, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because in my work with pain patients, one of the things you notice is that the person, in order to try to get back to normal life, they block out any changes in their body.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if their body is improving very slowly, they fail to recognize that. And then in their mind, there is this long feeling of it will never occur. And I think when you have somebody, whenever we're trying to protect ourselves from the pressures of daily life and all the responsibilities, sometimes we do something similar. Mm-hmm. We get to where we shut off, and we don't want to feel, because sometimes feeling is overwhelming for us. Mm-hmm. And as I'm able to teach those people to feel a little bit, then they will notice there's a change, and it's almost like it's not that they don't want to get better, it's that it's like if you've ever had a thorn or a sand spur stuck in your hand as a child, please don't pull it out because it's going to hurt. But after you pull it out, it doesn't hurt anymore. Yeah. And that's the thing with that feeling of awareness, of being the observer. It's like you sort of have figured out a way to shut your mind off to the pain, but it's still there and your body's not healing. I had somebody the other week. She was a nurse, in fact, yesterday, and her hamstrings were very tight. And because I was thinking about you in our interview today about people in medicine and feeling things, and I said, hey, you're an athlete. What's going on? And we got her hamstrings up to 90, and I asked her to identify the feeling that she had, and there was different. Sometimes people can only give you a color because they have taken that and put it out of their mind for so long. And so she said, well, it was kind of restrictive, like suffocating. And so then I said, I have her notice the feeling now when we let off the stretch, and then you could feel the freedom. And so people want to do things once they've had that experience. Restriction. Well, in their subconscious mind felt restriction. They didn't know what their feeling was until they got in touch with it. And then as you let off of that terrible feeling, now it's freedom. It's wonderful. And so now, just like you in people setting up a routine, sometimes you don't want to do the routine because you don't want to feel the things that you feel that you're trying to suppress or keep away.
We're coming together.
Yep.
It's better than better.
Well, I think we're kind of winding down, coming to a close.
Okay.
Thank you for joining us, and
Thanks for coming.
Yes.
And thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Bridget, for coming.
Oh,
Thank
my
you so
pleasure.
much.
Thank you.
Yes.
It's been fun.